All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Fiveable Review session for this week. And this is going to be focusing on the progressive amendments. Previously, we looked at the progressive era as a whole, and in this time, we're going to take a look specifically at the amendments, but also looking at the progressive era as far as our context, okay? Because really, it would just take us very little time to rattle off the amendments. 16th Amendment, income tax; 17th Amendment, direct election of senators; 18th Amendment, prohibition; and 19th Amendment, women's suffrage. But what does that really all mean, and how does that fit into the context of the progressive era? So before that, we will go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that are coming in right now. Now, remember, go ahead and upvote questions that you want to upvote and make sure that we see what people are going to do here. Okay, so as far as that goes, why did Congress deem the, now wait, Jackie, okay, now the question asks, why did Congress deem the 16th Amendment to be communistic despite support from the West and the South? Now, I don't know if, you would have to say at what time and exactly what does that mean. I think communistic's a bit of a stretch. Now, what I'm not understanding is that evidently Congress must not have found the 16th Amendment to be too communistic, because remember that in order for a constitutional amendment to pass through, to be ratified by the states, unless there's an Article 5 Convention of States, which has never happened, then what we're looking at here is that Congress has to pass it by 2/3 of each house. Okay, so 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate. So now, could there have been a few members of Congress who found it to be communistic? Now, of course, that's also something that can be a loaded term as well. But now the other thing we've got to keep in mind as well is this is right before 1917. Okay, so this actually passed before there was an actual communist regime in place in the Soviet Union. So as far as that goes, I'm not quite sure what you're thinking about there, but it could be an argument against an income tax, because what we have to remember is, hey there, Dylan, and what we need to remember is we think about the income tax, and specifically progressive taxation. Now, progressive taxation in this sense does not mean the exact same thing as progressive, as far as somebody being a progressive. But there are three types of taxes in general, okay, when we're thinking about how taxes affect people. There is a progressive tax, which impacts the rich more than the poor. So with progressive taxation, and the income tax is a progressive tax, okay? It is a tax that typically the more money someone makes, the larger percentage of their earnings that they will pay. Because what we're inferring here is that everybody has to buy things like groceries, and everybody has to pay a mortgage, and all of these other things. There are so many necessities. Everybody's got to buy gas and have a car and stuff like that. So the idea is that people who are well off should do a bit more to support the government. Okay, so now as far as that goes, you could have a progressive taxation scheme that's like, whew, you look at what Ocasio-Cortez has recommended with a 70% top tax rate. Now, the thing is, the United States right now, our top tax bracket is just under 40%. Okay, so as far as that goes, now, of course, you add state income taxes, sales taxes, all that kind of stuff. But as far as that goes, there are some countries that in the past, nowadays, there's really no civilized country that has a top tax rate above 60%. So when we hear 70%, that's a proposal for, something higher than anything that's existing right now. Bernie said 55 when he was running in 2016. And so the thing is, though, that in general, progressive taxation, the income tax is an example of this, is that the more you make, the higher a percentage of your income you pay. Now, then there are flat taxes. Now, flat taxes impact everybody about the same. Okay, now you could have a flat income tax where, after your exemption, everybody pays the same percentage. Now, there are also regressive taxes. Okay, now regressive taxes, those are taxes that impact the poor more than they impact the wealthy. And so examples of regressive taxes would be, for example, cigarette taxes. Now, cigarettes, as far as especially in the United States, is that cigarettes tend to be smoked more by people who are, who are working class or, or poor than they are by people who are upper middle class or wealthy. Okay, so these people are less likely to smoke cigarettes. So when we put high taxes on cigarettes, it's a sin tax, but it is also a regressive tax because it impacts people who are, working class and poor more than it impacts people who are well off. Now, another example of this would be a gas tax. Okay, gas taxes are regressive because everybody has to buy gasoline. And so when you think about it, if everybody has to buy gasoline, just like, the person who makes $30,000 a year has to buy gasoline, just like the person who makes 300,000 or 3 million or 30 million a year, then a gas tax is going to have a bigger effect on those people. So, communistic, that is something that's like way overboard. Okay, that's just over the line there. But at the same time, it is something that's much different than the Gilded Age. Okay, because when we look back to the Gilded Age, what we see there is that the income tax is replacing tariffs as the #1 source of revenue for the United States government. So before the income tax was adopted, what you had was, these high protective tariffs. And these high protective tariffs, these were things that when you think about the farmers in the South and the West, they're having to pay more money for stuff because of these tariffs. Because, when they could bring in goods that were made cheaper from other countries, instead, they're having to buy things that were made in this country and they're more expensive and especially artificially inflated by the protective tariff. So as far as that goes, the income tax definitely would have had some opponents among conservatives who did not want to see an income tax, because before there was the income tax, you had a system of taxation where the wealthiest Americans weren't really paying all that much in taxes because their incomes were not taxed. So that's why you had some, opposition among conservatives because they wanted that old system of tariffs, which wasn't affecting them as much and was keeping profit, industrial profits high. And if you weren't, a farmer, you were a farmer or laborer, you were doing fine. Hopefully that answered your question, maybe in a roundabout way. All right. So as far as that goes, yes, Lily, we would definitely want to look at World War I as a causal factor for women's suffrage, not only in the United States, but everywhere. Okay. So as far as that goes, with women's suffrage, that's something that most countries are doing that after World War I. So just to kind of put this in a broader international context, let me go ahead and pull this up. And let me make a little note on Twitter while we're here. Okay, so, let's see. All right, pulling that up. All right, so let me go ahead and share your screen here. All right, so let's go ahead and get that going. Okay, so no, whoa. No. I don't want to change camera and mic. Okay, cancel that. Cancel that. Okay, no. It's okay. Oh, now it wants to share the screen. Okay, now, okay. Having a little trouble here, but it's going to get there. Okay, we're getting there. Okay. Sharing. Okay, excellent. All right, so just to kind of put this in a global context, now this is something when you're thinking about contextualization, this would be great contextualization because it is showing what's going on. It's showing a bigger picture of women's suffrage. So as far as that goes, we see here that let's see. Okay, so let's go for the year. Okay, so the year women first gained suffrage at the national level. Okay, so far as that goes, let's see. Okay, so 1917, we see Armenia, we see, excuse me, Canada, Estonia, Latvia, the Netherlands. Okay, so during World War One, now the Russian, Russia. Okay, so this was under the provisional government. Okay, so the Russian provisional government, which was right before the Bolshevik Revolution, they granted, they recognized the right of women to vote. Germany, which when they created their Weimar Republic, so we see here in 1918. Now, as far as that goes, now the United Kingdom is always incremental like that. Okay, so for 10 years, women could vote at 30 with property qualifications, or if they'd gotten they graduated from a university. So as far as that goes, 1928 is when you see women had equal suffrage with men, but that's very British to be incremental. All right, and so as far as that goes, we see here the United States, okay, 1920. Now, one thing that we want to note here as well is that before the 19th Amendment, remember federalism, ladies and gentlemen, before the 19th Amendment, we have, there are several states that, that allowed women to vote. Now, when we look here, we can see here that, this is something from, now I've got a lecture about this that is online, that is on YouTube. You can take a look at progressive amendments and you can see that, okay? But I want to show you a few things here that women's suffrage went from west to east. Okay, so there was a certain point where you see that it's the western states that were allowing women to vote. And so, which also is something, I went to a teacher workshop in Wyoming some years back, and it was pretty enlightening as far as talking about how the pioneer experience was something that, when you think about going on this wagon train, and the woman is really like you're going on the Oregon Trail or the California Trail or the Mormon Trail. And so on these Western trails, the women are, they're having to participate very much equally in making everything happen. The wagon gets stuck. It's not like, oh, ladies, step aside, let the men do that. Everybody's got to do that. And so as far as that goes, there definitely has been, some scholarship, and really it doesn't really take a lot of scholarship to kind of put two and two together, that you're looking at this frontier experience that is making women's suffrage in the West something that's happening before it's happening in the East. So prior to 1920, pretty much, you look at every state that was, from Arizona westward, or every state from Colorado westward, except for New Mexico. But you see here where the only states that really were keeping women from voting at this time were in the East. Okay, these places where the culture was much more entrenched. Okay, so as far as that goes, you see where, it's just on the eastern seaboard here. The farther west you go, you see that women were voting even before the 19th Amendment. Now, I need to update this a little bit. This has changed some, but when you look at marijuana laws in the United States, now, of course, you see in the Northeast, of course, in New England, is an exception here. Like when you look at women's suffrage here, there wasn't a whole lot of women's suffrage going on in New England. They had some very limited suffrage. But as far as marijuana laws, that seems to be very much going from west to east as well. But again, that map would need to be updated. That's about a 5-year-old map. So just a little bit there, but yes, definitely when you're thinking about causation, look at World War I as a causal factor for women's suffrage. That is something that I think is very important. Okay, so yes, you're definitely correct about that. All right. So as far as that goes, Oh, okay. Now, as far as that goes, Dylan, an Article 5 Convention of States, all right? Now, this has never been used, but in order for a constitutional amendment to happen, then, because really, and that's one thing that kind of relates to the progressive era, because the progressive amendments to a large extent undermine traditional structures of federalism. Because when you think about it, before the progressive amendments, before the income tax, only states could tax incomes. And the only way that the federal government could get money from states is to do an assessment of the states, and all of the money would have to be assessed equally, which of course, presents its own problems when you're looking at the United States in the 20th century, because especially when you're looking at after Reconstruction, the South remained very, very poor for years and years and years. And so what happened is, for there to be an internal revenue assessment according to the Constitution before the 16th Amendment, then there would have had to been an assessment of the states where it was per head and it was equal throughout the United States. And that's really kind of unworkable in a country like we had during the progressive era, where, some of the sections of the country were much poorer than others. So as far as that goes, originally, when they were writing the Constitution, it's 3/4 of the states to get an amendment ratified. Now, there are two ways to propose amendments to the states. First is it going through Congress. Okay, so the amendment goes through Congress, gets 2/3 of the Senate, 2/3 of the House, and then goes to the states for the approval of 3/4. But there's also another mechanism written in there to where 2/3 of the states could call a convention, kind of like the Constitutional Convention that created our Constitution, and they could create amendments. They could propose amendments to the states through that means. And as far as that goes, a lot of people are afraid of that, I think, because remember that the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, the stated purpose was to amend the Articles. And so since the stated purpose was to amend the Articles, and they came out with a completely new governing document. Now, so some people are kind of scared of a convention of states because they believe that that's going to be what happens if we were to get together, even though I think that our Constitution's been around a long time, and I don't think that they would fundamentally change it at this point. But I think that a convention of states might be a good thing, because you think about things like congressional term limits. Now, we did see with the 22nd Amendment, which the 22nd Amendment's easy to remember because two terms. All right. So as far as that goes, that when we look at the 22nd Amendment, that set term limits for the president, official term limits for the president. Now, Congress will put that through. But even though there is popular support for congressional term limits, Congress will not do that. So if we ever want congressional term limits or a balanced budget amendment or something like that, then you're going to have to do that through a convention of states, because Congress isn't going to do anything that would undermine its own power. But at the same time, we don't have right now the support for, let's see, so how many states have called for, so you can see here how many states have called for an Article 5 convention. Okay, so right now there are 27 states in which legislatures have passed resolutions calling for a convention that would propose a balanced budget amendment. Okay, so there are 27 right now, but 34 states would have to make the request. Okay, so 34 states would have to sign on here. So 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 7. Count on my fingers, make sure I'm right. Okay, so 34 states. If 7 more states. So the thing is, even though we've never had a convention of states, we certainly could see that happen in our lifetime, the way that that's going. Okay, we could very well see that we need to do that. Now, as far as that, we can see, let me show you this article in The Economist. If we look at this is kind of fascinating, because again, there is that, why haven't we seen an Article 5 convention? Well, we see here in this article, this article was here, I swear. America might see a new constitutional convention in a few years. If it did, that would be a dangerous thing. Okay, so the person who is writing this is saying that, that basically this is, this could be, well, you have to pay to read the rest of it. But the author's thesis is saying that this could be dangerous, that this is not desirable, because it certainly has an unpredictable result, even though I think that they could call it for specific purposes and come up with some very specific amendments. But that's an interesting thing to think about. All right, so as far as that goes, what specific reform movements question the effects of the Industrial Revolution, and were any of them trying to protect the natural environment? Okay, as far as that goes, certainly if you go back to the antebellum period, you can go back to like the transcendentalists and other groups that were forming these utopian communities to kind of get away from industrialization. Now, of course, at the same time, you also had the social gospel. Now, I think we might have mentioned that before, that the social gospel talks about, an obligation to help the poor. Now, as far as that's a little different from Andrew Carnegie's gospel of wealth, saying that the wealthy have an obligation to society to help society on their own terms. Okay, so as far as that goes, and then when we think about protecting the natural environment, that is when we get to conservation. Okay, so that's of course part of the progressive era. Like Teddy Roosevelt was a big, supporter of conservation. And so this is something, that you start to see all of these technologies. And for the first time, it's like, this is having like a negative impact on the environment. We're seeing smokestacks and all of this kind of stuff here. Now, of course, there are some different views of that. Are we trying to preserve nature, or are we just trying to make sure that it's sustainable? Like for example, today, like a lot of people, of course, I go back and forth with this with my students about things like, recycling paper. And I'm like, hey, recycling plastic, I'm all about. Recycling paper, I'm not as worried about it, because paper is a renewable resource. Now, what happens is that the paper companies today, they own large forests, and they rotate it through. So they cut down one bit of forest, they replant the trees. Now, what was going on at the turn of the 20th century, you had people basically going and exploiting natural resources and not replacing them. And there was this sudden awareness that we need to make sure that this stuff stays around, because the buffalo were just about extinct. And we're seeing that people are cutting down trees and not replenishing the environment. And so, when we see, what I'm talking about is what they would call sustainable forestry. Okay, so that's where we're managing the forest. And that's, of course, where you start to see more federal forest. Okay, so when we think about federal forest, that's something that Teddy Roosevelt definitely a big fan of. Okay, and also, when we think about sustainability, Teddy Roosevelt was a big hunter. Now, a lot of your biggest environmental advocates are hunters, because they want to make sure that the wild game doesn't go extinct, because if the conditions aren't right in the environment, if we don't take care of the wetlands and other things like that, then you're not going to be able to hunt. So Teddy Roosevelt was a big game hunter, and was also a big fan of making sure that, the environment was taken care of for that, so that, you don't have all these things going extinct. You can't shoot animals if they're not there. All right. So, okay, we've got we got a few more questions. I thought we had 18 questions. We've got 18 people. Okay. So as far as that goes, all right, so Cheyenne, while y'all are asking some pretty interesting questions here, I'm going to go ahead and post this, Cheyenne. That what you'd have to do now, for example, the Electoral College is one of the the few remaining bastions of federalism in the Constitution. In order to get rid of the Electoral College, you would have to propose an amendment to the Constitution that would say that whoever wins the popular vote is going to be the president of the United States, because the Constitution right now has the Electoral College. Now, I don't think that that's ever something's going to pass, for a variety of reasons. But, because you would, that would be more of a government discussion. But yes, you would have to amend the Constitution. Either it would have to get the approval of 38 states. Any constitutional amendment has to have the approval of 3/4 of the states, which in today's terms is 38. All right, so what else did Carnegie discuss in his Gospel of Wealth? Now, the Gospel of Wealth is pretty simple. Now, I haven't read the entire book or anything like that, but you want to be familiar with the premise, all right? That essentially this is, this is essentially, when you think about it, now, Carnegie, you could incorporate a little bit of social Darwinism into this, in the sense that the people with money, okay, when you think about like the mindset here, is that the people with money, that they have money, according to, if you think about social Darwinism, Horatio Alger stories, that sort of thing, that they have money because they have certain traits. They're fit, and society has benefited because of them. Now, Andrew Carnegie says, in terms of the Gospel of Wealth, that I have an obligation to give back, but I need to give back on my own terms. Now, Carnegie would not have been a fan of the income tax or anything like that. Okay, and now, Zoe, that is, I don't know. I think this question is a little bit, I don't know how related that is directly to APUSH. I'm not quite sure about that. But anyway, let's go ahead and kind of get into the progressive amendments. Now, I've got a lecture on this on YouTube, but I think sometimes when you got a live audience, it's nice to be able to talk about some of this as well. Now, what I want to note here is that I'm not just, you can look it up online in your book or anything like that and see the amendments, okay? But I want to look at these in the context of the progressive era, and also show off the context of what's bringing these, these amendments to happen, okay? Now, remember that amendments, okay, are like wolves. When we think about amendments, they're like wolves. They travel in packs. Now, there are three bodies of amendments that you can see that they're big bodies. Now, there's another pack of amendments that we see pass around the civil rights era, when we think about the banning of the poll tax and the lowering of the voting age to 18 nationwide. But the Bill of Rights, the Reconstruction Amendments, and the Progressive Amendments. So when you look at this, that by 1920, the Constitution, between 1792 and 1920, the Constitution was amended only 9 times. And 4 of those amendments, bam, 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 progressive era, okay? So we want to make sure that we've got a pack of amendments here. And this goes back to this whole thing here, like, how do we look at the Founding Fathers? Now, somebody who's more of a conservative looks at the Founding Fathers and says that these people had something right, okay? That these illustrious men crafted a governing document based on timeless principles that will never change. Now, that is not a progressive mindset. Now, a progressive would say, I respect these people's intellect. I respect what they did. What they did was a constitution appropriate for their time. But the thing is that the progressives felt like this Constitution was not ready for the rigors of 20th century urbanized life. Remember, in 1920, we have the first census that has the United States majority urban, okay? The United States majority urban. So as far as that goes, that the majority of people in the United States were living in urban areas, whereas when the Constitution was framed, 5% of Americans lived in urban areas. 95% of people in the 1790 census lived in rural areas. So you've seen a big change. And so the progressives felt like the Constitution needs to change with it. And I wrote a preamble for the progressive amendments. And let's remember that we're looking at the income tax. We're looking at, direct election of senators, prohibition, and then also women's suffrage. So we, the progressives of the United States, in order to form a stronger central government, organize society based on scientific principles, regulate business, promote moral improvement, and secure the blessings of democracy, to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish these amendments to the Constitution of the United States of America. So we see that the progressives, they felt like they weren't big fans of federalism. Okay, now federalism, I mean in terms of divisions of power between the federal and state governments. Typically, when we talk about federalism in a government context, we're talking about the role of the states. And so what we see here is a stronger central government. We want to organize on scientific principles, the regulation of business, promoting moral improvement, and democracy. Now, this is what I've got here, that you've got four main goals of the progressives: scientific principles, moral improvement, the regulation of business, and political democracy. And when we look at the progressive amendments, the income tax, the direct election of senators, so the prohibition of alcohol and women's suffrage, you can look at it on a bit of an index, kind of, when you think about what's going to promote this. And where did I have? Yeah. So when you think about this, scientific principles, okay, so you could see the income tax and also the prohibition. Okay, the thing is, as far as prohibition, that alcohol was seen to have a negative effect on a lot of people. It made people less moral. Now, also, the thing is that it did regulate business. So when you're looking at all of these scientific principles, moral improvement, the regulation of business, and political democracy, okay? So as far as that goes, the 16th Amendment is the federal income tax. And so the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the states and without regard to any census or enumeration. So remember that before that, if Congress were to do an internal tax, it had to assess the states equally, and it had to be based on census material. But now we see that the Internal Revenue Service can now take directly from individuals. So before the 16th Amendment, they had to be levied in proportion to the population. And the states would, are basically standing in the way there. Now the federal government can tax personal incomes directly without regards to the states. Now, as far as that goes, the 17th Amendment, the direct election of senators. Now, there was a wide perception in the early 20th century that the U.S. Senate was a corrupt body. We can see this cartoon, the bosses of the Senate, where you see in the corner, the people's entrance is closed, okay? This is a Senate of the monopolist, by the monopolist, for the monopolist. And this was a Gilded Age era cartoon. And so you see all these trusts walking into the Senate, and they're the ones who are in control. Okay, they're going through this big monopolist entrance. And so what was the popular perception was becoming that a person could just donate, give money to the state legislature, and all of a sudden they've got a Senate seat. Now, to the extent that this was true, I'm sure there were some examples, but it was probably a bit overblown. Now, so the 17th Amendment, the direct election of senators. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the people thereof, rather than appointed by state legislatures. Now, what's funny about this is this was actually due to Cosmopolitan magazine, like the actual muckraking piece, which in a previous session we talked about muckraking and how that resulted in the exposure of corruption in government and big business. And so at the time, Cosmopolitan was actually, it wasn't one of those magazines in the grocery stores they put a little screen in front of so the kids don't see it. This was actually, you see an old man there. This was a magazine that was just kind of a general readership magazine. And so there was this series called The Treason of the Senate by David Graham Phillips. And he's writing about, basically portraying the Senate in a very corrupt kind of terms. Now, could there be some validity to that? Sure. But remember that muckrakers, there was some sensationalizing about this. So that's something that's important to note here. So that series was very much responsible for that. Now, how much the 17th Amendment gave power to the people, not so sure. Now, I'm not trying to pick on my senator here necessarily. You can look up your senator at fec.gov, and, Senator Lindsey Graham, you see that, a good bit of his contributions come from political action committees. Now, when you look at the blue individual, I would encourage you, look up your senator and get a feel for how much of their contributions come from people outside of their state. Now, it's not just my senator. It is your senator. I guarantee you, especially if your senator's been there a while, they're getting a lot of large contributions by people who don't live in their state. So the point, as far as that goes, progressives believe that if we have the popular election of senators, then the Senate will be more directly responsive to the people. To the extent has that happened, not so sure. Now, as far as that goes, remember also just the idea of federalism, okay, that I think this is something that, definitely we see that, senators today are more beholden to their donors than they are to the states that they represent very often. Now, when they were appointed by the legislatures, they were more likely to vote in ways that were, along the lines of their states. But it's an interesting debate about the 17th Amendment that has the 17th Amendment resulted in the American people having more control over their senators. Again, I'm not so sure. The 18th Amendment, prohibition of alcohol. Now, this amendment is one of those things that kind of exposes some of the flaws of progressive thinking, okay, which of course every philosophy has its share of flaws. But as far as that goes, remember that the old Jeffersonian mindset didn't have faith in government and didn't believe that government should protect people from themselves, okay? So what's happening here is that the progressives did a lot of things to try to promote moral improvement and also to, public health, scientific principles. For example, they shut down red light districts that were in New Orleans and other cities. Of course, not only was that a moral issue, but at that time, of course, that was also a source of, they were spreading STDs and stuff like that. So it was also seen as a public health issue. But progressives believe that government should be a force to, when people say today, you can't legislate morality. Well, the progressives at the turn of the 20th century, they believed you very much could legislate morality. And this was a colossal failure. And the 18th Amendment is the only amendment to be repealed by another amendment. Okay, so the 21st Amendment, which I think works out great because 18, you can't drink. 21, you can drink. So when you remember that, 18, 21. Okay, so the amendment numbers are very, very easy there. Stay hydrated, kids. Now, so in 1776, happen. Start to see the women's suffrage movement take shape in the antebellum period, and after a very long time, it finally gets gets going. All right. So as far as that goes, let's see. So then we've got, as we said, the West to East and the whole frontier experience contributing to that. And then World War I as a causal factor as well. So the 19th Amendment. Now, the other thing to think about is ladies last. Okay, so if you're thinking about the progressive amendments, not ladies first, but ladies last. Okay, so as far as that goes, let's see here. Yeah, then we've got the amendments there. And remember those overall goals. How do these amendments really, exhibit the spirit of the progressive era? Okay, so as far as that is understood, I've got that there. I'm going to see if we've got any more questions. And I think there may be some sort of mini Kahoot game available. Let me look into that. All right. Oh Lord. Let's see. Not okay. This was sent to me in a meet. Well, wait. Actually, maybe I can sign in there. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so let's see if we've got any other questions. Okay, it looks like we've got a few questions coming in there. All right. Why was the 18th Amendment not stricter? Actually, the 18th Amendment was pretty well. The thing is, the amendment itself actually, when we look at the amendment itself, it wasn't as strict as the laws that were passed to enforce it. Okay, like when we look at the text of the 18th Amendment, we look at the text here. Let me just take a look here that the ratification of intoxicating liquors. Okay, now here's the issue. Okay, that when it comes down to it, the amendment said intoxicating liquors, but the law that was passed to enforce it also banned beer and wine as well. So, the thing is, you almost wonder if they hadn't made the law so strict, okay? If the law had not banned beer and wine. I mean, during Prohibition, it was not legal to drink not only liquor, but also beer and wine. So you almost wonder if beer and wine had remained legal, then maybe you would have had less organized crime, during that time. But as far as that goes, I would say that it was the legislation that was passed to enforce it that ended up being very strict. And it wasn't easy to enforce because that's the thing. I mean, when you make something illegal that people want, and I mean, it's just not going to happen. Now, something like murder or theft, we can make those things illegal. But when you create products that people want and you say you can't buy this, then that's going to cause some problems. All right. Let's see. The extent were the problems of the progressive era. Okay, now this is a very vague question here, Lily. I'm not sure what to do with that. Okay, so to what extent were the problems? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to go about handling that. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to see what I can find. What I can find here. Let's see. All right, let's see what we can do here. I'm going to Kahoot, and I'm not exactly sure what let's see. So I don't know if any fiveable staff are available here. I'm not sure about that, okay, because I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be running this or not. Are there any fiveable staff people here? Um, all right, so what am I supposed to be? Let's see. Y'all bear with me. I'm trying to get this thing set up. All right, waiting on five. Well, I see the dots here. It looks like fiveables, getting back to me. All right. It's for me to play with them. Okay. Now I don't understand quite what we're doing there, but let's see. All right. So they've got this thing there. I'm okay. Share my screen. Okay. Let me see what we're looking to do here. Uh, Okay, got it, got it. I think I've got it. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, if y'all want to join this this Kahoot game here, I'm about to share my screen. Okay. Okay, with game pin 105471. 105471. Okay, so we've got a couple people here. 105471. All right, I got. Let's get a few people over there. Okay, so if you got the Kahoot app on your phone, all right, we've got a few. We've got 3 players. All right, 6 players. Okay, good deal, good deal. 7. All right, welcome, Jackie. All right. Okay. So we're about to get started here. Okay, we're about to get started. We got 10 players here. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. There will be 12 questions. Are you ready? Hopefully you are ready. All right. The corruption displayed in this image most directly led to which reform? Uh-oh. Wait. Okay, yes. Now remember, not the 16th, but the 17th Amendment was the direct election of senators. So most directly, ladies and gentlemen, that was a Gilded Age one. So that wasn't quite a progressive amendments one. So that was a little bit of a dirty trick there, it looks like. Okay, so Alston, you got it. Which progressive reformer would be least likely to use this image to support their work? I'm not going to lie, I don't even know. I have no idea. It's going to be a surprise to me. All right. Ida Tarble. Okay, I don't know. I can't explain that to you, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't come up with the questions here. All right, Cheyenne, nice job. Nice job. All right. Which of the following best illustrates the context of this image? Okay, all right, let's go to the next one. All right. All right, got that one. Criticize the power of the railroad industry. All right, nice job there. All right, products such as this one were addressed by the policies of which progressive politician? All right. Teddy Roosevelt, Pure Food and Drug Act. Okay, so we got Carter. All right. The issues outlined in this cartoon are most representative of the work of which progressive? All right, Ida B. Wells. Now, Ida B. Wells worked on. She was writing about lynching. Now, Booker T. Washington's there too, and that's somewhat related. So, if you got that, you were close. You were close. Okay. Where did the secret ballot originate? Australia. Another name for the secret ballot is the Australian ballot. Okay. I don't think that'll be on your exam, but it's just a nice bit of trivia there. All right. And Carter, followed closely by Austin and Cheyenne. You are nipping at the heels. Before U.S. senators were chosen by a popular vote, who would choose them? All right. Very good. State legislatures. Very good. Which reform was a direct result of Upson Sinclair's 1904 novel, The Jungle? The Meat Inspection Act. Very good. Very good. Okay. So looking at that, first wave of feminism led to the following effects for white women, except. The right to sit on juries. Okay, which, yeah, there's actually an attorney that I was talking to recently, just a few months ago, and he was talking about in the course of his career, like when women started sitting on juries, how that, changed a lot of things in the legal profession. All right, which politician ran for president 5 times between 1900 and 1920 as the Socialist Party's candidate? All right, Eugene B. Debs. Okay. Yes, exactly. You're right about that. All right, one more, I think. Yes. Which amendment prohibited the sale and manufacturing of alcohol? Okay, and it looks like actually the answers weren't mixed up, so they were all red or something like that. So, all right, nice job, Alston, followed by Jackie, followed by Lily. Okay, very, very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so remember to follow Think Fiveable. Okay, remember to follow Think Fiveable on Instagram and Twitter at Think Fiveable. Okay, and of course, we will be here every Wednesday between now and the end of April. And so next week, we are going to look at Black leaders in the Jim Crow era. Okay, so make sure that you keep up with Think Fiveable. And also remember Fiveable Plus. If you go to fiveable.me, you can find out about Fiveable Plus, okay, which is going to allow you not only to see replays, but also is going to allow you to be able to participate in sessions that are going to be specifically for subscribers closer to the exam. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, as far as that goes, let's see. Yeah, we've got yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we're getting in. I don't know if I'd necessarily see the connection between the progressive era and foreign policy necessarily. But and then World War II, we're a little bit ahead of that. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I will see y'all next week, and our area of emphasis will be on Black leaders during the Jim Crow era. So everybody, have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you in a week. It's always a pleasure.